Welcome to the Real Life Podcasts with your hosts, leadership and personal growth author and speaker John C. Donahue and licensed psychotherapist Lou Carfisi. The Real Life Podcast is your weekly dose of motivation, encouragement, and direction to help you live your life at the highest level.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Real Life Podcast. My name is John. I come to you from johncdonahue.com. Joining me, as always, is my co-host and best friend, Mr. Lou Carfisi from lifecarecounseling.net. We are the Real Life Podcast, and we are here to provide you your online resource for real help, real hope, and real life. Lou, how you doing today, my friend?
Oh, I'm doing just fine, my friend.
Well, that is good. We have an interesting show this week because all you have to do is go online and look at the news, or turn on the television set or pick up a newspaper. If anybody really picks up newspapers anymore, with all the financial craziness of the last couple of weeks and the elections coming up and all that's going nuts, there's a lot of things that people can be afraid of. There's a lot of fear in the air. And so we thought that we would talk about fear as one of the emotions that we struggle with. So with so much going on, people have a lot to fear about, right?
There's a lot to be scared about. There's lots out there to be scared. If we're going to look for things to be afraid of, we're going to find them.
Right.
We've got terrorist attacks. We've got horrible events happening all over the world. And if we want to concentrate on that, then we certainly can. But it would put our lives in stall. We would just sit there.
Right. Yeah. It would paralyze us if we really stop to think about it. I can just imagine if, there were aliens and looking at us right now and just judging us by how our news feeds are and how people react to it. They would say that there's a lot to be afraid of, and that there's a lot of people that are acting like they're afraid. And what we wanted to do today was to kind of discuss fear, the different forms of fear and things that we're afraid of, and then give you some practical steps so that you can work to deal with it better. You can control it, you can get past it, and you can really, really combat and overcome those fear responses that we have. So let's go ahead and get into that. Let's start out by talking about some of the things that we're afraid of. I mean, some of the things that we're really afraid of.
Well, I think if we're afraid, we're usually afraid first and foremost about harm.
Right.
Something's going to happen to us. There's going to be some event where someone's going to harm us physically. They're going to do something to us that's going to cause maybe some kind of pain or some kind of physical harm, as in the attacks from the last few weeks.
Right.
Everybody's afraid of that. We don't want to think about it all the time. We don't talk about it that much, but we are afraid of physical harm. And all you can do is what's reasonable in protecting yourselves, right? I mean, you just be careful of where you go, what you do, and who you speak to.
Right. And with this age of all the people on social media, if you're really afraid of what's out there, you need to be very cautious of what you're putting out there on social media, because there are people who are stalking people on social media, and they'll, break into your house, or they'll track you down. And, being aware in what you said makes perfect sense. Doing what's reasonable, being realistic and reasonable in your thoughts and in your actions. I think that is the best way to go. And we'll break down that in a little bit, but people are afraid of getting hurt, physically, financially. Great Britain just left the European Union, and what's that going to do to us, and what's that going to do to my stocks? And people are afraid financially, because if you don't have money, you can't live.
Well, depending on your point of view, the EU losing Great Britain is either a good or a bad thing. Financially, it could destabilize things, I suspect. But we could find better and more closer to home examples of financial worries, like maybe, how do I make my car payment?
Right.
How do I combat the ever increasing energy costs because of all the restrictions that are going on. How do I keep up with everything? I go to the grocery store, and what used to be a trip that cost me $100 is now costing me $200. So we're afraid of financial problems.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. We're also struggling with emotional things too. I mean, I think breaking down into being afraid, I think a lot of people are afraid of being hurt physically, but I think even more people are being afraid of getting hurt emotionally. And I think a lot of people are struggling with that, and that is paralyzing them as well.
Well, yeah, people are afraid. People who are afraid of emotional hurt, they don't think they can handle an emotional hurt. And the thing that scares them most of all is if and when it's going to come.
Right.
It's always a situation where you're interacting with somebody and you're emotionally involved with them, even if doesn't have to be a love relationship or even a close friendship. It's just that we interact with people, and there's an emotional component to every relationship.
Right.
Sometimes we don't acknowledge it, sometimes we don't use it, but sometimes it's there. Actually, most of the time it's there.
Right. And connecting the idea of being hurt from a relationship, one of the other big ticket items that a lot of people struggle with being afraid of is loss. Loss of the people in our lives, or maybe loss of something like a job or something like that. How do people deal with loss? I mean, you deal with that a lot in your with your clients. So how do people struggle with loss, and how do you tell them to deal with that?
Well, the ways that people deal with them are as varied as the types of people who experience them. But I will tell you this: I have seen people who have lost children. There isn't anything that you can say to them that's going to make that better. There's no procedure, there's no protocol, there's nothing. Because you lose a child, then you have this enormous gaping hole in your life where that child once was. And I don't think you ever get over it. So the fear of that is real, okay? There's only one way not to be afraid of it, and that's don't have any kids. Other than that, if you have a child, you have a fear. Also, your spouse. We have a fear of loss of our spouse or our friends.
Sure. I couldn't imagine what life would be without my spouse, because we really are best friends. I mean, we have moments just like every relationship does, and it's the same thing with like you. Lou and I have a very tight relationship. We've had it for a number of years. I couldn't imagine life without you, so.
Well, that's very nice, John. And then it's the feeling's mutual, but we depend on people more than we want to realize or more than we want to acknowledge. Okay? Right. And our spouses, our friends, and our children are all part of that group of people that are in our inner circle. And we lose one of those people. Well, you know what? It's a loss, and it's a big loss.
Right.
But other areas of loss, we're afraid of losing our jobs.
Right.
I don't have a job per se. I own a business. Okay, so I don't have somebody who's going to come in and say you're fired.
Right.
Okay, but things happen in the world. Things change, and I never know what's going to happen in my, in my arena in the psychotherapy. We don't know the regulations or the issues that are going to arise, especially with all the fluctuations in insurance. So everybody has the fear of losing a job or losing income in some way, shape, or form.
Right, and that's the thing. It can be very paralyzing, and I don't want to just gloss over this because I know we're gonna talk about it later. But for me, I'm in the same boat as you. I have my own business, and I'm building it, and I'm not afraid of losing my job. I've pretty much walked away from a job to start this, but what I'm afraid of is nobody's going to come knocking on the door, to hire me. Those are the things that I fear. Those are the things that keep me awake at night. I'm not going to get clients, or nobody's going to buy the book, or, I'm not going to be able to put food on the table because my job is not supplying that money. And if I really stopped and thought about it all the time, I would not be able to get out of bed, because those fear thoughts just roll through my head all day long if I'd let them. And I think that is the piece that we're going to really dig into in a little bit, is just, letting those fears run away with us. And because of your job, those are big deals. There's a lot of people who are dealing with job loss and trying to figure out what they're going to do next, if they can do anything next.
That's true. Well, and all of this really goes down to and boils down to the unknown.
Right.
Because we don't know if we're going to lose our job, we're going to lose our spouse, we're going to lose our children, we're going to lose our money. We have no idea. So the unknown is always there. And from a psychological standpoint, we cannot live in that world where we are so afraid of everything that everything that we don't understand or don't control is a threat to us. You see people who do this. There are people who have obsessive compulsive disorder problems, who lock their doors 40 times. They'll get up in the middle of the night and keep locking their door, checking the gas on the stove to make sure that it's not on. This is one complete way out there way that people worry. But if they knew for sure, if they were calm and understood that there's no way anybody can hurt them, or the stove is not on and the doors are locked, it might get better. But they're not going to be able to prove that to themselves because of the unknown.
Right. Do people struggle with that more who have those controlling issues? Like, I don't necessarily think that I'm a controlling type person. I know I have aspects of it, but I've known people who are really like control freaks. I hate to use the word freaks, but really very controlling. Do those people really struggle more than more people who are just like laid back?
Yeah, but it's also reciprocal, because the more we worry, the more control we want to have. If we're afraid of losing our spouse, or let's say that we're afraid of losing our family or a member of our family,
right,
what is the best way in your people's minds to think, well, how can I make sure that doesn't happen? Well, I have to control it.
Right.
I have to make sure that this doesn't happen, and this does happen, and this is what happens. This is one of the things that happens with children, especially. We don't trust them enough. Sometimes, I'm not saying everybody, but sometimes we don't trust our children enough to do the right thing, which means we don't have really a whole lot of faith in our own parenting skills. But bottom line is, if we're that worried about our children, it's not going to do them any good. It's not going to do you any good. And they're going to wind up thinking that there isn't anything that they can do right. So the more we worry, the more we want to clamp down control on our especially teenagers, because we're starting to see glimpses of adulthood in our teenagers.
Right. That's true. And other things about the unknown that can cause fear are, daily things, dealing with having a hard conversation with your boss. I can remember days where I was just petrified, knowing that I was going to have a really bad conversation with one of my bosses. Dealing with a loved one or a spouse, when you have to have a hard conversation or something's wrong and you have to fix it. There's all sorts of things that cause us to be afraid in just our daily lives, and that are connected to the unknown, because we don't know the outcome, because we don't know everything is going to happen in the conversation. We are afraid. We worry about it. And worry is something that I've wrestled with for a long time, and it never, ever helps. Worrying never helps and solves the problem. It's amazing how that works.
Right.
Do it all the time, doesn't help a thing.
No, it doesn't. One of the things that psychological issue here behind the unknown, is the fact that the unknown is always scary, because it lets our imaginations run wild. We think, well, if this happens, maybe this will happen, and that just might trigger this. And then on and on and on and on and on, we wind up worrying about things. We like to anticipate things that are going to happen. We think that if we anticipate them, that it won't be as bad when it happens. But all we're looking for really is relief. The unknown is scary, and the unknown has an effect on us. And if we live our lives worrying about the things that possibly happen, we will not live our lives.
Exactly. That's brilliant. Other things that we're afraid of moving forward is relationships. There's a lot of aspects to relationships that cause us fear. A lot of things that are, like you said, out of our control. Like our friends, we are afraid that we're going to miss out on times with our friends, being with our friends. Our friends are going to find other friends and forget about us. We struggle with those type of issues. And sharing, one of the things that you brought up yesterday, I'd love for you to dig into this, is problems sharing your life.
Well, one of the hardest things for people has to do with an emotion we talked about last time, that is, which is vulnerability. If you have a problem being vulnerable in front of your wife, let's say, or your spouse, then you're going to have a problem with trust in that relationship. We have to be vulnerable, and as men, it's very difficult. But we are going to share our lives. We're going to share our time. We're going to share our resources. We're going to share our emotions with another person or persons, depending upon if we have a family. And that is a scary prospect. We don't necessarily think it's so easy to say, hey, sure, my life is an open book. You can know anything that you want to know. And then you decide that you're going to get up and you're going to go to the store, and you don't say anything about it. And then you go to the store and come back, and your spouse says, well, where'd you go? Well, I went to the store. Well, how come you didn't tell me? I didn't think I had to. Well, yeah, you do have to, because now your life is different. Right. You're sharing it. You're right. Sharing all the pieces, even the parts that aren't important. You're sharing that. Right?
Yeah, I totally get that. I bump into that on occasion myself. But yeah, it's crazy when you get into a relationship. When you're single, it's one thing. All your decisions are yours. All the consequences of your decisions are yours. And when you get into a relationship, it's a little different. Not all the decisions are completely yours. And sometimes you share in some of the consequences. You might not have been a part of any decision making that your spouse or significant other made, but because you are connected as a couple, some of those consequences kind of come your way as well. And that is something that for people who are really into control, it causes a lot of anxiety and causes a lot of worry for those who like to worry all the time.
Right. And the same goes for friendship relationships. And these all cause trust issues. Mm-hmm. Because when somebody is not sharing something with you, or they're not sharing their lives with you, or they're only sharing pieces of it, it's very difficult to trust that person.
Right. Right. Another aspect of relationships and something that causes fear is not being accepted. And especially for younger people, school-aged children and young adults, and even some older adults, not being accepted is a big, fearful thing. And I have dealt with that for a long time, and I'm sure that a lot of your clients have dealt with it as well. It's horrible not being able to be accepted by a peer group or being accepted by a group of people. If you're new in a school, or if you're new in a company, if you're new in any area of your life, not being accepted by the people that you're trying to gain their acceptance from is a horrible fear.
Right. And it also has its extreme. And the extreme of that is, I can't exist unless everybody likes me. I have to be accepted, and everybody has to think the best of me, or, I'm not a good person. I'm a people pleaser. When people say that to me, I want to pull all this gray stuff off my head. It makes me crazy. I can't stand listening to that, because you don't have to be accepted or even liked by everybody, because most of the time, 50% of the people are not going to either agree with you or like you,
Right.
for whatever reason, because of their own junk, because of whatever that might be going on in their lives.
Right.
So at some level, you have to be secure enough in yourself to know that you're a good person. You know that you have wonderful qualities. You've defined yourself in a very clear and concise manner, and you know who you are. And if you got people in your life that don't like you, or they don't care about you or care for you, or don't accept you into the group, that's life, and it's going to happen.
Right. Absolutely. It's like Gary Vaynerchuk talks about, you have to be your own biggest cheerleader. And if you don't believe in yourself, it's going to be really difficult for other people to believe in you. And if you are the only person who believes in you, that should be enough. Because like Lou said, you have great skills, you have great attributes, you have great traits. You can be your own best cheerleader. And then what's crazy about that is once you start getting comfortable in your own skin, more people will flock to you, because you'll exude confidence, you'll exude all those qualities that people want to be around. And it's crazy how that circle happens, and people are so afraid that they're not going to be accepted, that they don't exude that confidence. They don't exude those feelings, those vibes, so to speak, that people pick up on.
Yeah, those vibes are very zen.
That's true. Yes, they are.
They are.
Yes,
Okay.
they are.
So
Well,
another fear, John.
Yeah.
This is
the
this
opposite.
another fear is what we have when we start getting older. Loneliness. Nobody likes being alone all the time.
That's true.
There are people who don't mind having some time by themselves. But if you're lonely, then there's nothing that's going to fill that gap. No card game, no online game or anything is going to take its place.
Yeah, no binging on Netflix, no,
No.
Ordering out of all the different places you can order out from, no shopping on Amazon. It's not gonna make up for that.
No, it's not. And most of the time, people who are older are worrying about dying alone. Yeah. They're not necessarily worrying about dying. They don't want to die by themselves. And that's understandable.
Right.
They don't like to live alone. Nobody likes living alone all the time. It's not that we have this need to have another person in there with us all the time. It's just that we have to have a relationship. And even if the relationship is not a daily relationship, as long as we have someone who is in our lives, then we're not necessarily alone.
Right. We're built for connection. We're built for relationships. And when we don't have that, there's that itch in the back of our heads that it's almost impossible to scratch, because, you're not getting the interaction. You're not getting any type of anything that you need. You desperately need it, because that's how we're wired as humans.
Right. And we need people. So then there are those who dislike the way they are because they've got a war going on in their heads. One part is telling the other part that you're no good and you're useless. And the other part is saying, no, I am good. I am useful. And when they're living in this war, there's no way that they're going to be able to think that they're good enough to have someone else be in their lives. No significant other, no partner, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever the situation may be.
Right.
And that fear only feeds into the loneliness and feeds into what can turn into a very serious depression. So never having another person to live with you, although some people choose that, most people don't.
Right. So those are somewhat rational fears. I mean, there's exceptions, I understand, but those are things that are daily fears that we all kind of deal with to a bit greater or lesser degree. But the last topic that we wanted to touch on before we started talking about the strategies to combat that fear is the irrational fears that we all seem to have. Like, I don't like flying. It's not that I don't like airplanes. It's just I don't like heights, and I have a fear of falling. It's not so much the falling, it's just the sudden stop on the landing that I'm deathly afraid of.
Well,
so what about those irrational fears?
Just like anything else, it might not be 100% irrational. Planes do crash. I mean, things happen. But the fear of flying in general, there are people who have a phobia. And these are all phobias. They're afraid of driving. They're afraid of traffic. They're afraid of flying. They're afraid of anything that has to do with certain aspects of what most people consider to be normal. Right. Normal life, normal activities during the day or night. And those we're going to put in the category of irrational, even though some of them can have a basis in rationality.
Right. Like germaphobes, people who are extremely afraid of touching anything or having any germs. I put like Howie Mandel. He does not like to be touched, and that's not a big secret. He's petrified of being touched. He doesn't like it. Now, I understand, you don't want to, walk around with dirty hands, and, you certainly want to be clean and hygienic. But I think Howie, if people are like Howie, they've taken it to such an extreme that it becomes irrational. I think that's what you're talking about. It's an irrational to the extent that he's afraid. But I mean, there's certain things that are accurate. You don't want to walk around with, you don't want to play with a raw chicken and then just start putting your hands in your mouth, because that could lead to salmonella poisoning.
That's right. I will never play with a raw chicken again. Howie needs therapists.
Yes, that and many other things. But yes, you are correct. So we've talked about a lot of those fears, and you might have resonated with some of them, and you might have your own set of fears. So what Lou and I want to do is we want to go through some very simple to say, sometimes hard to do, strategies for combating those fears. And the first one is very easy to say, sometimes difficult to always do.
Well, tell them what it is.
Yes, sir. And the first one is trying to seek out positive people, keep positive thoughts going through your head, have positive experiences, and to really just focus on it, and to help you stay positive. Because if you're filling your days with positive experiences, hanging out with positive people, and you're trying to rewire your brain to think about all the good things and the positive things, that's not going to leave a lot of room for those scared thoughts, those afraid thoughts, those negative thoughts that creep in. I'm not going to be accepted at work. Nobody's going to like me. You start retraining your brain to start telling yourself, I'm great at what I do. I'm a really good whatever you do. And I have a lot of value. I'm funny and I'm likable. So I know when I go to this new office, people are going to eventually like me, and just start thinking about all the positive things, and you won't have time to think about the negative things. That's so the first one is to stay and seek out positive people, experiences, and keep positive thoughts.
And make those people your support system.
That's the number 2 thing. Absolutely right.
You need a support system. What is the support system? Support system is a bunch of people that are there for you, no matter what. These could be friends. They could be members of your family. They could be your family itself. Could be anybody. If you have a support system, you just got a raise. And if you don't have anyone living with you, you got to, hey, guess what? You got to tell somebody. Because events in your life, both good and bad, we have to share them, because that's how we are. It's who we are.
Right. Again, wired for relationships.
Right.
That's the great and the curse of being a human. The next thing is run it through a reasonability filter. If you have a fear of a conversation with your boss, run that through a filter of, is it reasonable? Have you been working as hard as you can? Have you been doing a good job? Do you know that you don't have any reason for your boss to be angry with you? Maybe he wants to congratulate you and give you a pay raise and maybe a job promotion. You know, bosses have conversations with their employees all the time that aren't negative. So if you've got a scheduled meeting with your boss, maybe it's going to be good instead of worrying about all the negative. When you run it through that reasonability filter, you can discover the truth usually.
That's right. And take that example that John gave you and use it on everything. Things don't, even though you don't know what they are, they don't necessarily mean it's going to be bad. Is it reasonable to believe that if you've missed 2 weeks of work and when you are at work, you sleep half the time? I mean, yeah, you should be reasonably afraid that something's going to happen to your job. But unless you're doing something bad, or unless, somebody just absolutely does not like you, which happens, it happens in jobs. You have to run it through the reasonability. Is it reasonable to think? And then answer the question. If it's not reasonable to think that, then throw it out of your mind because it's useless. It makes people always afraid.
And
are you always afraid?
That's a great question. That's a question you should ask yourself. If you're always afraid, there's something wrong. There's something seriously wrong to the tune of you probably need to reach out to somebody like Lou or myself.
That's right. And the last strategy for combating fear is probably one of the hardest, but it's the most effective. Remember that worrying is a useless activity and it won't change anything. How many times have you thought about something all day? Oh man, I just know this is going to happen and that's going to happen. And then you start developing the scenarios of the domino effect of all the things that could possibly go wrong in your life when it's probably nothing. But even if it is something, are you going to be better able to work with it if you're upset and worried? Or are you going to be better able to cope with it if you're calm and reasonable and straight? And that's how you have to handle things. Life throws junk at you, and you have to be ready to take it and ready to answer it. And there's not something to worry about. It's something to take action about.
Well said, my friend. I don't think I could have said that any better.
Okay.
All right. So those are some simple strategies that you can use to combat fear. I think putting worry in its place, making sure you have a support structure, making sure that you are remembering that you have to stay positive and keep positive thoughts going in your brain at every time. I think those are great strategies. And if you have a question or a comment, or you need to reach out to Lou or myself to maybe get a little bit of assistance in something that you're afraid of, please feel free to reach out to us at Please feel free to reach out to us at questions@reallifepodcast.com. And where can people find us out on the internet, Lou, if they want to leave us a message somewhere else?
Well, they can find us on Facebook at Real Life Podcast. They can find us on Twitter at twitter.com/reallifecast, or they can go to our website, which is reallifepodcast.com. And that's where we'll be. You can get us, you can message us, you can see and listen to some of the podcasts that we produce. And we'd love to have you come and visit.
Yeah, and while you're there, don't forget to sign up for our weekly newsletter where we send you a dose of motivation, encouragement, and some direction so that each week you can start out reaching for the next best first step. And I think next week we're going to be talking about laziness versus inactivity. So it should be a very fascinating conversation. Lou, thank you as always for all of your brilliance and your insight.
Well, thank you, John. That's quite a compliment. Thank you as well.
Yeah, and for all those of you who are watching and listening, thank you for taking time out of your week to be a part of the Real Life Podcast. Remember, real help, real hope, and real life here at the Real Life Podcast. Have a great week, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the Real Life Podcast. Find out more information and sign up for the Real Life Podcast newsletter at reallifepodcast.com. You can also learn more about our hosts, Lou Carfisi at lifecarecounseling.net and John Donahue at johncdonahue.com. And remember, live your life to the fullest. And as always, we want to encourage you to choose to be awesome, because when you choose to be awesome, you will be. Have a great week, everyone.